Well, it's great to be here, and I feel like a closer in baseball. If I was better at pitching, I think I would be a closer in baseball. But no, I think it's just been an incredible conference. I think the wise words of Lord Black has been incredible. Of this is really Alberta's moment to shine, and it's something that we, especially as a provincial government, have an opportunity to be able to seize it. And I think, especially with Premier Danielle Smith and the wise words that she said earlier today, goes a long way in ensuring that Alberta can be that leader. And whether we have obviously uphill battles with the federal government, I still think there are things that we can do, and we can be creative as a province to be able to move forward. So I'm confident in knowing that we as a province can be able to grow and expand and to achieve our potential if we work hard enough at it.
Okay, well, I'm executive. This is on, right? Executive Director of Modern Miracle Network. We're a promoter of resources in oil and gas in Canada, and so I asked if we could have you here to talk about our resources and transport and access and markets and so on and so forth. So I've got three questions for you for this audience. So, and the first one is transportation corridors. This was an idea of Ernest Manning. I mean, maybe others, but I mean, that tells you how long this idea has been around. Why hasn't it happened? What do you think about it? And tell us what optimism or pessimism do you have about it possibly coming now?
Well, you look back in the history of Alberta, even the ring roads in Calgary and Edmonton were way back in the social credit time to be able to say that Edmonton and Calgary are going to grow up to a metropolis that is going to need a ring road around these municipalities. And it took decades to be able to finally build and complete. So I think we can move hopefully faster than 50, 60 years. But when we look at economic corridors, I've personally been out to Prince Rupert twice in the last 2 years. And there's always been the old adage that is the port of Alberta in Prince Rupert. And back in the day, the Lougheed days, they actually invested into a grain terminal in Prince Rupert. And Premier Smith has been talking about a bitumen pipeline going to Prince Rupert. There's been numerous LNG projects been proposed out near Kitimat and Prince Rupert. And AltaGas is actually operating a propane facility there that would love a pipeline to be able to be established there, where they get all their propane coming from Alberta by train. So if they could have a pipeline, that obviously would increase their exports to Asia. So there's this push that we have done from Alberta, because we're obviously a landlocked province, but we need to make allies. And that's why I was happy as Minister of Transportation and Economic Corridors to work with the Port of Prince Rupert, give them some study money to show the federal government that if we could have an economic corridor going to Prince Rupert, it would not only benefit Alberta with royalty payments going up, but also would benefit the entire country. So it's finding partners and finding relationships that actually can improve Alberta's lot.
Okay, well, my second question is going to be about pipelines, which is associated to the corridors. But we had a very interesting panel here about illegal drug smuggling and cigarettes in Canada. And what we learned from that panel, that there's already an existing national pipeline that these cigarettes and drugs are traveling the country along through Alberta, and how key Alberta is to potentially stopping that or permitting it. And so I just want to ask you, like, relative, do you think this Bill C-5 is going to allow us to build pipelines for things besides cigarettes?
Well, I obviously would hope so. When obviously President Trump had his fentanyl czar that was appointed not too long ago, the federal government here in Canada had their version of a fentanyl czar who actually came up to Edmonton, spoke with Public Safety Minister, myself, and Premier Danielle Smith. And when we looked at the Montana-Alberta border and drugs coming up from there, it is an issue, but it pales in comparison to what is happening at the ports, whether it's Montreal, Halifax, or Vancouver. And to obviously to be able to stop that, to be able to work on public safety at our ports and our imports is a major issue. But I think it was tongue-in-cheek of, will Bill 5 actually be able to have more economic corridors for legal goods? I hope so. But I also think it is frustrating that the Liberal lottery of what Liberal cabinet ministers decide is a project of national interest, it can be developed. It's not what has the best economic benefits, it's not what passes all the permits, it's not what is the best business case, it's what gets approved by the Liberal cabinet and the committee set up by the Bill C5 office. So that to me is a bit of frustration. I think you can look at other countries around the world where governments only allow certain projects and proponents to actually develop and do business in their country. Some might call them banana republics, but I think that is an issue that we don't have a certain set of rules that all businesses can be able to apply and work on, and that we do have this weird Bill C5 issue, but they are the federal government, and we're obviously going to try to get as many projects that benefit Alberta across the line as possible.
I feel, I'll just do it as a quick follow-up question. I feel very ambivalent about it, because if deregulation is good for 20 projects picked by the Liberals, why isn't it good for 10,000 projects?
Well, I wonder where the environmentalists that would say that we need to have Bill C-48, the tanker ban, out of BC. We need to have Bill C-69, which is the Federal Impact Assessment Act. Why do we need to have these things if certain projects, because the Liberals say so, can go around them? I've never seen that on CBC. I've never seen why someone can actually say why that is the way it should be. But that apparently is going to be the new way of the world in the coming months and years here in Canada. So it doesn't make sense to me. I think as not a partisan issue, but as a common sense logical issue, you would say governments are supposed to set the rule book, and then businesses are supposed to be able to follow those rules.
Okay. Gary. Okay, so my last one, I'm not sure if this might be a bit of a debate. This might be you be right on. But as the Minister of Transportation, when people talk about the consequences of, you know, if Lord Black were to get his citizenship here in Alberta and vote successfully for our separation, as he indicates he might, we would become landlocked.
I picked up on that. Yeah.
We'd become landlocked. And so now Marco, who's here, Navarro, has made the argument that Alberta is worse today. We're something called enclaved. Like we're like the Holy See in Rome. We're completely surrounded by Italy. Well, here in Alberta, we're completely surrounded by Canada. You can't get across a federal border without going through a federal border point, right? So enclaved, in his view, is actually worse than landlocked, where you would at least have access to international law, treaties, access to the seas, plus you'd also have powers to be able to say, well, if you won't let me transport through your province, I won't let you transport through my province. So I'm interested in your thoughts as a Minister of Transportation in a hypothetical. If we were, where do you think Alberta would be if we did end up in a landlocked position?
Well, I'm going to try to answer that question because it's a complicated one. But I truly believe that the Constitution of Canada allows for the federal government to be able to allow interprovincial trade of goods from provinces, and provinces should not be able to have a veto to stop a province from being able to export its products. Like, no one ever talks about Manitoba grain being blocked through the Great Lakes and not being able to go out through a Manitoba tanker ban going through the Great Lakes. But yet, for whatever reason, the current federal government believes that they can circumvent the Constitution by able to block Alberta from exporting products throughout the country. And that's the whole reason why, I mean, it was just Alberta's birthday for 120 years. The whole reason why Alberta in 1905 signed on to a constitution was to make sure that they could, as a province, a landlocked province, could be able to export their products internationally. And so when the federal government is not following the Constitution, I think that's why, very much as Lord Black would say, people in Alberta are wildly frustrated of what is Alberta's place in Canada if Canada doesn't respect the Constitution and the rules in which Alberta signed on to being a part of Canada.
Yeah, and I think thank you. I think this is Marco's point, that when you're enclaved and they don't follow the Constitution, there's very little you can do about it. Whereas if you were landlocked, you could do things, and you're the Minister of Transportation, you could say, well, if you don't let me move our products through your province, perhaps we won't let your products move on the railroad through our province. You see what I'm saying, right? To
be able to block Saskatchewan or Manitoba or Ontario products coming across.
Well, let's just talk about British Columbia.
Or BC cherries or wine coming across. That's a fair point. But, sorry? Yeah. So I think that is obviously an issue, but I do believe, here's an example, a live example of dealing with the United States. There's a border road that we have with Montana in which the U.S. government is now saying, because it actually is technically in the United States of America, but there's always been an agreement of Albertans to be able to use that as their local road without crossing the border. They're now saying that is part of the U.S., and Canadians, you have until that next year to be able to stop accessing that, or else we'll arrest you, and they'll get serious about it. So there are obviously international issues, and so I think just to say, well, we can just obviously join up with a different country, I think it's not that simplistic to be able to say here's an easier answer. But again, we have a federal government for a reason, and they should be following the Constitution.
I think you did a good job of dodging that question.
Well, we could get into theology, into Rome, yeah. And
okay, 2 minutes. I'm interested, Minister of Transport in Alberta, tell me the top 2 or 3 interesting, challenging files you're working on.
So the Highway 686 from Fort McMurray, if you could pretty much draw a line straight west from Fort Mac going to Grand Prairie, that is a 200-plus kilometer road that would open up the entire region of the oil sands. And it's not just a road. It's looking at an economic corridor that would have a potential for a rail line, utility lines, and then all of a sudden you're looking at the giant sulfur deposits that are there in the oil sands, as well as to be able to export things from Fort Mac going out to the BC coast and Port of Prince Rupert. That is a huge, big project that we're working on, and we're hoping to see shovels in the ground very soon. So 686 is a huge, new, big expansion project, which again is being tied up on Bill C-69 because the Federal Impact Assessment Act says even a project that is in a province and is a provincial road, if it's over 150 kilometers, it has to go through that process, which is asinine and ridiculous. But that is something that we're working on to try to get across the finish line. And then just building the infrastructure across the province. We're obviously, almost 5 million people here in Alberta. Everybody that's driving up down Highway 2 realizes the increased traffic congestion. To be able to make sure that our infrastructure and our road network fits the needs that Albertans have is a big, huge project. And as a $3.5 billion ministry, it could double that, and I think Albertans would see a huge benefit. But that's a fight that I have with Treasury Board all the time.
Okay, I have a suggestion for you on this problem of the being over 150 kilometers. It's the person caught speeding 100 kilometers an hour in a 50 kilometer zone, and the officer says, you realize you're going 100 kilometers an hour. He says, yeah, but I was only going for 30 minutes. So I think you could just say I just built 2 100 kilometer roads, couldn't you?
I like the timing aspect of that. We'll take that back. Yeah.
Okay, there's my suggestion too. Okay, Devin, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing some ideas with us on transportation and corridors, et cetera.
Thank you, Michael.